I got the audio box. Thank you very much. Thank you for sending this to me.
You're welcome. I'm surprised it
This
got
is very
there that
cool.
fast.
Audio box Go, PreSonus. PreSonus. That sounds so.
They're fairly well respected. They're no name in audio recording gear. I mean, not professional. I mean, not like serious high end professional, but it's a perfectly fine little box. It's just Did you
Yeah,
try
it's
it
great.
yet? Or you just
No, I just
took it out of the
literally
box?
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my kid came up and brought the mail, and here it was.
Voila, like a foundling child.
Le voilà. Oh, and it's got like panning. Oh no, that's not. That's input levels.
Yeah.
Mix doesn't have panning, but that's all right. Yeah. Main. I got to experiment with this. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. It's the magic of electronics.
Fantastic.
So one of the things we talked about was I asked you about a book about Buddhism, of which I know absolutely nothing about. And the book was recommended.
Yep.
Buddhism Through History, or
Correct.
Buddhism. Maybe I should have this up on my screen right now.
Buddhism: A Journey Through History.
A Journey
by
Through
Donald
History.
S. Lopez Jr. And let me just get this straight. I think it was Jim Rosen who recommended it.
Yep.
And let me see if I can find him here. All right. So no, I'm sorry. It was through a different chat. Mindful Aware. And yes, first thing he recommended was Donald S. Lopez. And then there was Foundation as a Buddhism, recommended by Gemini.
Right.
Gemini AI.
But I wasn't as interested in the actual ideology of Buddhism. I was more interested in Buddhism as a historical phenomenon.
Well, let me tell you, I have listened to as much of this as I can handle.
Right.
It is enormously in depth, I think, for a history. Exhaustive. That's it. It's exhaustive and exhausting. At least for me,
It gives the distinct impression that Buddhism is like a lot of words.
Yes.
And a lot of contradictory. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, tell me what look, I'm a Buddhist. And even worse, I consider my Buddhist tradition to be the Mahayana. So Lopez talks a lot about the Mahayana.
Can you it's like what Theravada and Mahayana are the two big strains, and he doesn't if he explained it, it went right over my head. Can you explain it to me, like what people get well,
I think one thing that he points out, and I think that this he makes a correction, and it should be said that there is Theravada and then Mahayana, and then he doesn't really put Vajrayana in its own school. He includes it in the Mahayana, as I remember. And I guess that's accurate. Now, what's missing is what got dubbed the Hinayana, which is sort of like his explanation was like, that's a slur, like don't say Hinayana. And I think there was another word that he gave for that term. Hinayana was like what the Mahayanists were using to describe the previously existing school. It's not the Nyingma, but it's something like.
Was it?
I thought it began with an N.
These are the people who the primary difference with this particular school was how they dealt with the issue of no self. That there is.
Oh no, that's another one. You're right. That's
the VIGI.
I've never heard of them before.
Okay, fine. Okay, forget that. Okay, go ahead.
I forgot the name, but yeah, that was really interesting. But yeah, so those who shall not be referred to as Hinayana, it's called greater and lesser vehicle, or greater and base vehicle. Right, it's a slur. Those who should not be referred to by that term were sort of the original followers of Buddhism, and then Mahayana kind of split off and gave them a bad name, and somehow it stuck. Like and I wish I could remember there is another term for that vehicle, but So you ask a Mahayanist, and they'll say there's the greater vehicle and the lesser vehicle, and then there's the Vajrayana. The Vajrayana is something else entirely. And I didn't quite get a definition out of Lopez. Maybe you heard one. I didn't
No,
finish the book.
I'm completely like I'm already lost. Like what I understand is that there's this thing called Buddhism. Let me tell you what I took away from the book.
Great.
There's this person who existed, most likely in India, most likely in the 4th century BC, although there is very little actual documentary evidence to pin down even approximate dates of his birth and his assumption of nirvana.
Right.
But the general consensus seems to be 4th century northern India.
I thought it was 5th century, but
okay. Could be, because seriously, like, it's not like we're talking about was it June or was it December. We're not talking about whether it's 12 BC or 18 BC. We're talking about whether it was 480 BC or 612 BC, or some other document says 800 BC. So I'll take 5th century.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues, is that, it is kind of fuzzy at the outset.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this person, the Buddha, who taught many things, who spoke to people and had many teachings. And there's Vulture Peak, which is, there's certain things, there's certain
Deer Park. There are certain historic or mythological. Well, they're not mythological places, but yes, there are some locations, storied locations, and he was a storied figure, and yes, it's hard to tell.
Right. And so what happens is that he preaches this philosophy and these teachings. And there's the Dharma, which is sort of the philosophy, and then there's the something, which is the rules of discipline for the
monastic order,
for the monastic, for the people who do it. And then there's a third thing, which I think is, sayings or analysis or other writings about the Buddha. But anyway, these travel, and they travel in many different directions. And perhaps one of the most interesting things about Buddhism is that after a certain while, it fundamentally disappears from India. Like it's certainly much reduced.
And it was about economics too. That was an interesting part of that it evaporated because the money dried up. There was no, people lost interest, or they just stopped. Anyway, keep going, because a lot of interesting points.
So, and this is good, because this is coming out from somebody who knows nothing about it. And so the other interesting thing about Buddhism as a practice is that there's no churches. There are people who have committed their lives to be what are referred to in English as monks or nuns, but it's kind of it. But certainly there's this idea that there are people who take a vow to devote themselves, and they cannot, there's a lot of, and anytime you make any statement, every statement has this nimbus of,
it's like a myriad.
Most of the time, not always. It's like,
and 100 classifications for everything.
Right. And there's a lot of fuzziness, but in general, you can't, if you take these pledges, you can't, you can't make money, you can't touch money, and you can't toil. So you're supposed to live on alms. And people are supposed to give things to you. You cannot work for things. And
you have to stop eating at noon. You have to stop
eating at noon. And there's the rains retreat, which I found absolutely fascinating.
Oh, yeah, the monsoons,
absolutely fascinating.
You can't travel in the monsoons because of ecological problems, because people were saying the monks were trampling the vegetation during the monsoons.
And the insects. It's amazing how very specific it gets. Very, very specific.
Anyway, what's with these tree huggers? Stopping the Buddhists.
Get off my yard, you punk. You saffron robe punk. I got a gun here. So But all joking aside, so they form these. So the knowledge the knowledge migrates, and it
Hmm.
migrates up into China,
Yeah.
um, through China over to Korea and to Japan. And at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, it goes southeast down into Thailand and Cambodia,
Hmm.
and even further than that. And
Yeah.
actually, Tibet, which
But
in
not until
many,
the seventh
it's
century,
very late. Like
current
Tibet,
era.
yeah, Tibet is a very late newcomer to Buddhism. Um,
Padmasambhava. Yeah.
what?
Padmasambhava. Or as so I would not recommend this book as an audiobook because the narrator mispronounces everything and it makes it really hard. But he Padmasam well, it might be pronounced Padmasambhava, but he doesn't really quite do that either. But yeah, Padmasambhava was a with a Tibetan teacher out of I think it was out of the Nalanda school that brought Buddhism to a particular emperor of Tibet during a very warlike time. That's a pretty fascinating story. But yeah.
Mhm. And so Buddhism goes to China where it seems to be incredibly successful.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, and it goes into all these different locations, but it kind of evaporates
In
from
India,
India.
where there were universities and monasteries and stupas and yeah.
Right. So right, and so the stupas are the dome-shaped structures.
Hmm.
That's part of the architectural legacy or the architectural traditions of Buddhism.
Yep.
So you have the monasteries and you have the stupas, but there's no churches
No.
and there's not much involvement. It's not like there's like a mass or communion
Right.
or anything like
Yeah.
that. The lay public, they're supposed to give you alms, and that's about it. Um,
Yeah.
Generally, I mean,
Well, they yeah, and it was very opportunistic when it grew. It appealed to the wealthy. You've got all this stuff now. How about enlightenment? And if you give to our monastery, if you establish the monastery, so they relied on the patronage of the very wealthy.
right.
Not unlike any religion, not unlike Catholicism, certainly.
Right, but they because they could not toil, and so
Yeah.
what Lopez talks about is that the monasteries grew quite large,
Hmm.
and they were endowed with hundreds of acres of large acres of lands, and
Yep.
people toiling it, and people to manage the people toiling it, and they answered to stuff. So you have this story that's told a million times over and over again, which is that these monasteries, broadly defined, become very wealthy and become very influential, become very attractive and very threatening to governments and other people and stuff like that.
Hmm.
That's a whole different story. But the interesting thing to me is that in Buddhism, there's no church and there's no real massive involvement. There's no this idea of calling the congregation together and
To hear the good
reading things
word,
to
yeah.
hear the good word to confession, to
Now,
confess their sins or all that stuff.
one thing I would say is the stupas did gather people, and people would make offerings. And I think there was, I mean, Buddhism borrowed the term karma from Hinduism, and they borrowed reincarnation from Hinduism. But reincarnation becomes a big problem when the Mahayanas break off. The Mahayanists break off from the, shall not be referred to as the, whatever, the
Right. The
general
others.
Buddhists at the time. And there, there's um, there's a problem. But so people would sort of give alms, donations, so that they would have better karma, so they would be reborn into a better life.
That's the primary. What I see is
Yeah,
that that's the primary participation of the lay people is to give alms.
yeah.
And that's sort of the primary dynamic between the Buddhists and the general populace is that people gain virtue, they gain karma by contributing or donating to the Buddhist monks and nuns. And that's,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a million variations as there always are, but that's sort of like the basic armature, the basic drive shaft of this entire thing. So it goes in different directions, and the the issue is that it's being developed in countries where it wasn't born.
Hmm.
So you have these massive translation issues of like, what does this word mean in India? How does it translate into China?
Yeah.
Fifth century Chinese,
Well, he
and then
says it
how's
wasn't originally in Pali. Pali is considered the source language, but he was saying that the Buddha himself would not have spoken Pali, and that Pali was an invented language in
right?
order to transmit. Now, I found that dubious. I also read side by side from kind of Wikipedia entries, and it's hard to know. I mean, Wikipedia contradicts a lot of what he says. Um, but yes, Pali to Sanskrit mostly, and and to Chinese and Japanese.
Right. And
Yeah.
so you have, and also there's a lot of words, and there's nothing that is and unlike like Catholicism,
Hmm.
where there is a central authority and there is a central text. And woe be the person who contradicts that central. I mean, there's a lot of
Right.
policing going on in uh, in Christianity. There's a lot of policing going on. Doesn't seem to be going on nearly as much in Buddhism. There seems to be far greater variation, and
True.
people do their own thing. And there's all these sutras,
Yes.
and virtually none of them were written at the time of the Buddha himself.
Correct. But there, so that's where Lopez makes a point of saying no written sutras showed up until the time of Ashoka, which is like 200, 300 years after the life of the Buddha. But if you also read other materials, there was a spoken tradition.
Right.
And when you have monks that are dedicated only to these texts, they spend a lot of time memorizing and
Sure.
reciting. And as a matter of fact, many monasteries and in Tibet especially, monks would uh, memorize the entire Abhidharma and recite it. So, a lot of the sutras are written in a way that are formulaic. They always start with "Thus have I heard,"
Yep.
and then they, when the Blessed One was dwelling in Deer Park, Avalokiteshvara was, so etc. Um, so he seems to negate the spoken tradition. It's like, yeah, Homer wasn't written down until
No, but he mentions
X year.
spoken, and he explains that a lot of the verbs in Buddhism are like to recite aloud and to hear, and that
Yeah,
it is an oral tradition. But it just seems like and people keep writing stuff. And
yeah.
then he implies that they try to like ex post facto say that this is what the Buddha actually said at the time. But that's okay. I mean, we're no strangers to Apocrypha. It
Yeah,
just seems like in Buddhism, it's it's on a different scale altogether, which is that there's just a lot more words.
there's a lot. It does seem very chaotic because, especially because he's presenting all of Buddhism at the same time in all of these different countries, and all of them have a different type of Buddhism that they practice. And so when you present it that way, it just sounds like a chaotic mess. If you were to go to a single monastery, they'd be like, well, these are the core sutras. And there are four that are generally attributed to the Buddha himself. Um, there is one about his death. There's one about
The Lotus Sutra he mentions all the time.
the Lotus Sutra. Now it's like, I don't know what to believe about the Lotus Sutra, and also the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. Those are what's called terma, which means someone discovered them, and they date as far back as 1100 AD, or what is it, current CE. Um, but Lopez also said that there's records that they had been found, but there are no surviving copies from as early as 400 in China. So it's not clear. Are
Right.
they new inventions, or are they are they representing like a private teaching or a hidden teaching that the Buddha gave, or gave it? th- Some of them are teachings that supposedly the Buddha gave after everyone had left the room.
Right. So, I mean, this. Forgive me. I mean, it's the
Yeah, right. I
historian.
mean,
It's the historian me. I'm constantly rooting around for documents like a truffle pig, and
hmm
the answer is it's not there. Like there is really not a bedrock to find here. So you just have to take it for what it is, which is it is a it's a phenomenon, and you have to take it at face value and take it for what it is wherever it is. But the thing I found, again, like I said, there's no churches.
but I
Um,
mean, there are temples
there's
sometimes.
there
This,
are.
yeah, well, there are now, and so I don't know when those began. I didn't get to the point where he talks about that, but there were monasteries, and I do does a monastery function like a church? I guess
I don't think it
partially,
does.
but not really. Yeah,
No, I
it's
don't think
not.
it
It's not
does.
like the congregation gathers on a Sunday
Right. The
for
whole
sure.
point is it doesn't sound like with Buddhism, like it's like every Sunday, it's like, everybody come on in. I'm gonna read you Corinthians
Yeah.
and we're gonna do baptisms. That doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, what I took away from it is that it seems that for most of its existence, Buddhist is practiced only by monks.
Right.
And the lay people make donations in order to improve their karma. So
Right.
they're afraid of being reborn as a hungry ghost, or there are three levels of hell and three levels of heaven in some of the traditions.
Right.
The Mahayanists would argue no, but yeah, you can be reincarnated as a lower animal, in constant fear, a dog with leprosy. There are warnings against subverting the teachings, and I have to say, I mean, reading it shook my faith a little bit in the traditions, because, well, actually quite a bit, because Buddhism seems to, at least according to Lopez, be just as full of superstition, and you know, um,
Scariness.
yeah, like
Scare the kids.
threat, yeah, scare the kids, as Catholicism or anything
Yeah.
else. It's just that the gods are not immortal. They're also worried about their next life, and the hell realms are many, but yeah, circles of hell, right? So, but they include also animals you can see. Hell realms are here on Earth. A hungry ghost is, wandering the hills, always starving. So it's odd, and there's tales of flying. The miracles of the Buddha, the miracles of the Bodhisattvas. It's the teachings that I've
Right.
learned
What about
are
you?
different.
What
Yeah.
about how did you come to Buddhism? What did you learn from it?
Well, I went to the I came to Buddhism through um um I ended up getting involved with my roommate back in my 20s. Um and she had grown up at a Buddhist retreat center, which sort of is like a monastery.
Uh,
Except in America, you kind of elect, if you're wealthy and white, you you're looking for an escape from the harrowing sounds of the city, and so you go up to Vermont and you sit in this practice center that's very beautiful and calm
well, I'm sure it's the
for a
same in
week in
India.
silence.
In India in
Yeah,
500 BC. I'm sure, like you said, it was probably fairly privileged people who said, "I've had it, and I
right.
just
I
want
need
to
to,
go."
I need escape. Put me in a cabin. Yeah,
Yeah,
here's some money.
right,
So my roommate had grown up um, at a practice center, and she had met a Tibetan Buddhist master, a monk named Chogyam Trungpa. And when she was a kid, she knew him. Her mom and dad were both members of this practice center. And they helped Chogyam Trungpa kind of get acclimated in the United States. And then he grew an organization called Shambhala, which Lopez mentions many times. but not the one that Trungpa
No, but it's yeah.
started, but the traditional belief in an enlightened city, that received the Buddhist teachings according to contradictory stories. Um, but it's this idea of an enlightened society, right? It's like Plato's idea of the republic.
Right.
And uh, my roommate had grown up in this tradition. This was her religion, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So I went up and I visited, and then years later, when my life was falling apart, I went to the practice center and I started taking classes in meditation, and I'm really glad I did. It actually was really great. Much later, I learned all kinds of weird and horrible things about that organization, and I left. Actually, I left before I had learned about the horrible things, but I did. I was able to go on long retreats and um, really deepen my meditation practice, and read like the Diamond Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, and the Heart Sutra, which were sort of the key sutras for me. The Heart Sutra being most important. There was a um, a terma discovered by Chogyam Trungpa, so that's mythological talk for he didn't write it, he discovered it, and you can interpret that however you want. But he discovered kind of a sutra. It's like a chant. It's called the Mahamudra. Um, the sadhana. He discovered what's called a sadhana, the sadhana of Mahamudra, which is completely trippy. And you only ever read this in a group of people, and you chant it all the way through. And it's completely bizarre. I have a copy of it here. But that's like a practice, and I mean, I got a lot out of it, and because I was seeing it through the lens of a particular Buddhist monk who had started a tradition in the West, I saw kind of a limited scope of all these variations.
Uh-huh.
Um, Now, most of the practitioners were moving towards the practice of Vajrayana, and Vajrayana includes it's like a yoga. It includes all the senses. It includes activity. Um, there's like everybody focuses. There's a sexual element to it. It's tantric, but that's not. I mean, the main thing is that we're not trying to block out our senses. We're trying to incorporate our senses, and we're trying to um, live in the world, but not like a monk, like a regular person, like the lay person. So it did evolve, at least through this teacher, into a kind of lay practice, but it seems to be very Western. That seems to be very Western.
Hmm. So your introduction to Buddhism was via a very specific keyhole
Yeah.
that you were looking through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
there's two other interesting things I want to bring up about Buddhism. One, it certainly casts a certain new light on a lot of things in Star Wars, and I know a lot of people are just going to like turn off the radio at this point and
That's
say,
funny.
"Screw you, Casson." But it's just like I can see that there's a lot of that in Star Wars. A lot of this stuff.
Oh, the
I
Jedi
feel.
stuff.
And there's a tree and there's books and there's I don't know, but I get I just get that feeling. It feels to me that's a lot closer to that,
Mm-hmm.
a lot closer to Buddhism than it is to anything else. And that there's there's this innate ability in certain people to do great things, blah 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 blah. But that's not the most interesting thing. The interesting thing was something completely different that I read, which was I read review, a book review in the New York Review of Books,
Mm-hmm.
and the lady was reviewing some biographies of Pilates, the
Hmm.
guy who created
Right.
Pilates.
Right.
But I didn't know nothing about Pilates.
The Joe Pilates or
Joe
something.
Pilates.
Yeah.
It's like sounds like a joke. Yeah, algebra was created by Joe Algebra. No, there's actually a Joe Pilates, and he was from Germany,
Mm.
and he was alive during the time of the First World War. Supposedly, he was in a prisoner of war camp, or I'm sort of garbling this one, um, but he worked with prisoners of war, And when he got out, he was a show boxer, and he started developing his ideas about how to tone muscles and correct the body and all that kind of stuff like
Hmm.
that. And during the 1930s, he saw that Germany was probably not a great place to hang around anymore. So he
Right.
moved to New York City.
Mm.
And I believe the only place where he could get like large studios which do his thing that he wanted to do was in Tribeca. And the only other, he had the incredible good luck of having as his neighbor George Balanchine and his ballet
Wow.
company. So George and Joe hit it off and talked to each other. And the ballet dancers start coming to do Pilates. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Right.
And the woman who's reviewing this book talks about her own experience, and she says, I'm a ballet dancer." And at the time I was introduced to Pilates, I would have told you that all my muscles were toned. I perhaps wasn't at the peak of performance, but I wasn't far from it, and I was
Right.
doing great. And she said, and to make a very long story short, and it's funny, and I'll send it to you if I can. She
Hmm.
said after I did like the first class, which was really minimal, like you have to like sit this way and stretch your legs this way, and then do 10 of these, and then 10 of those, and 10 of these, and 10 of those. She says 2 days later, I could barely get out of my bed. And she says, it's amazing. She says, it really changes your body. It
Right.
really
It
changes.
strengthens the muscles that you don't ordinarily use, is what you
Right.
told
Like
me.
muscles, yeah, that you don't even know the names of them. You don't even know who
Right.
they are. And they're like the size of a pencil. And they're the lateralis obligatus or something like that. It connects your kneecap to your earlobe or something like that. And you never think about it until you get in one of Joe Pilates machines and you bounce on your toes for 10 minutes. And this muscle that has never borne any weight your entire life all of a sudden does its thing. But it was very, very funny because you mentioned, you mentioned you mentioned this whole idea of meditation and
Hmm.
incorporating the senses, um, and we hear a lot about yoga, and he Lopez seems to have a dim view of this. He believes that the American that Americans only know about yoga because it dovetailed nicely with the self help movement in America, but it really has nothing to do with Buddhism. It has nothing to do with a lot of
Well,
stuff.
yoga is
Blah blah
not
blah.
really Buddhist. It predates Buddhism. It's that I think it comes from the Vedas, which is much older. And it's more in the Hindu tradition.
Yeah.
But yet Lopez is, I mean, look, this guy's very critical of Buddhism. Um, in general. If you just read some of what's on the Wikipedia page, it's a lot less controversial. So look, he's not like some crackpot. He's a celebrated professor who focuses on Buddhism alone, but he spends a lot of time pointing out all the contradictions between traditions and within traditions. He's not got a high regard for the Dalai Lamas. You know, he's he's very critical. I
Mhm. But
don't,
I
and
don't think he dislikes Buddhism. I think
you think he does?
I think he feels that it's his job to protect it.
Oh,
And that
interesting.
I guess what do I know? I've read 30% of the book. It's like reading Dominion. It's like you read 30. It's one
It's
of those
huge.
books where you're like, I'm almost done, right? Like I
Yeah,
can't be fine. Then you look
yeah,
at the little percentage thing at
yeah,
the bottom of the Kindle. It's like,
yeah.
holy crap, I'm only 20%. Forget it. I
I
can't do
might have
this.
made it further. I might have made it further than you. But
I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like 25%. But I don't get, I think Lopez thinks it's a serious endeavor. And
right.
I think the feeling I'm getting is that I think he feels that it has been encrusted by a bunch of things recently, and he is wary of that it's been sort of turned into this sort of happy thing for
Right.
dissatisfied Westerners, and I think he's trying to say that's not it. If anything, he's trying to say it's really hard to put a definition on this thing at all. Let me show you how far. I mean, he really emphasized the fact that it 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 has migrated over great distances.
Yeah.
And the things that for example, for you, your encounter with Buddhism was via Tibet, a
Right.
Tibetan tradition. And he says, and he makes it very clear, Tibet was one of the latecomers to Buddhism. There's like these Chinese and these Japanese traditions that are hundreds and hundreds of years older than Tibet, and blah, 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 blah. And he goes on and on about
But
that.
it survived there. It survived in Tibet kind of undisturbed for 800 years, 1,000 years, before. And then he starts talking about the Christians who encountered the Tibetan, like the Dalai Lama, the leaders, the Panchen Lama. And I think the first set were like kind of in awe, like, wow, these people seem really peaceful and nice. And then the second set talked about how the devil was manipulating them and, spreading the false teaching. And Christianity became very hostile towards Tibetan Buddhism.
Well, yeah. I
Uh,
mean,
of course, right? Of
well,
course, it's just a contradictory faith, right? But it was. I think the interesting thing about Buddhism in Tibet was that it was just it was alone for a long time,
right,
and it only actually exploded into the world very recently because of the invasion by China.
right.
Um, but so in Japan, of course, we'd known about. I mean, well, I don't know. We sort of known about Zen Buddhism longer, and in China, again, it was it. I don't know how much of Buddhism survives in China now. Did he? Did you? Did he read? Did he go into that at all?
No, but I do remember when I visited China in the
Hmm.
1990s, there were still Buddhist temples and people were allowed to practice, but it was very clear that it was not highly respected. The tour guide made a point of like walking. We walked between people who were praying,
Interesting.
and I was like, "Why are we walking between people who are praying? Why don't we just like leave them the fuck alone?
Right.
They're trying to pray." And only later did I realize, because I was so naive,
Right.
only later did I realize, maybe I misinterpreted the entire situation, maybe, but I think it was sort of the thing that, yeah, they're not accorded a lot of uh respect. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in China. That's the last thing. But
Oh no, they. I mean, they. Yes, it is not. Uh, I mean, I don't know. Have you seen Martin Scorsese's movie Kundun?
no.
So that would be a great follow up to this book. Is now Scorsese is in love with the Dalai Lama, so you're going to see sort of a purely positive envisioning of the Dalai Lama's life in Kundun, without the controversy, and there is controversy. Um, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful film. It's funny. I had to get to a gig, and I thought, well, I've got an hour to kill before I need to get on the road. I'll just watch like a half hour of Kundun. It's probably really boring, but I should probably watch it.
Right.
And I was an hour late for the gig. Like
Yeah, I'll be there
I
later.
could not stop watching. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the best films I've seen.
Yeah.
Kundun,
Tibet
Kundun.
Tibet has that effect on people. There's an album by Mark Isham, who
Yeah.
was a fairly famous like new age electronica, sort of like that Chuck Van Zyl. You're listening to Echoes on WXPN.
Mhm.
All those late night electronic guys who play the ambient stuff. Mark Isham was big. He played a trumpet and he played electronics.
Right.
And he's good. And he did an album called Tibet that I think is amazing.
Oh, cool.
Just an astounding album. It seems to elicit that reaction in people. But anyway, we digress. So, yeah, I might try to keep chipping away at this book because it's fascinating, because it's kind of refreshing to deal with something where the documentary history is so vague. You just got to take
Yeah.
it as what it is. You can't worry about what came from this and what came from that. It's just like, dude, give it up.
Well,
It's just like,
I don't know if it's more accurate or not, but I would definitely go side by side a little bit with the Wikipedia entries on the history of Buddhism as well.
okay,
Just because it doesn't seem to line up with what Lopez is saying. And Lopez may know better. And of course, it's crowdsourced. The history of Buddhism is crowdsourced and may contain mythology. It
or
may
very partisan
contain
stuff.
partisan stuff. So,
Yeah.
and it's hard to know. And obviously, the big problem is there wasn't a lot of documentation, direct documentation to survive, because it was an oral tradition at the beginning, or it may not have been. It may have been purely made up by monks at the time of Ashoka. We don't know what that was like 300 years later, and it may have been made up again by Nagarjuna in India in 300 AD or 300 CE, and then there may have been texts made up in Tibet after 700, after it traveled there. My experience is, though, that the core ideas are consistent.
There's
It's
the
really a
three
question of
jewels.
the three jewels, right? So, and there are basic
The
things. The
four
Four Noble
baskets.
Truths. The three baskets are
there's baskets and there's jewels.
the three baskets, I think, are the original sutras, although there
I
are
suck at
four original
Buddhism.
sutras.
I failed the driver's test.
And also then the Abhidharma is this huge book that I read when I was on silent meditation retreat. I read some of it, and I mean, it's really quite profound. I mean, I was really digging in when I was there. But there are some consistencies, right? There's the Eightfold Path, there's the Four Noble Truths, there's the Three Jewels, there's the Five Foundations of Mindfulness, there's the Six Poisons, the I forget what it was, the six poisons are what prevent you from meditating. I might have the number wrong. There's distractions. In Tibet, they cataloged all the different kinds of discursive thoughts, and I think they came up with like 537. So you have a tradition of people examining their minds, and I think that that's really what it isn't what happened uniformly in Buddhism, but in terms of the monks who were practicing meditation, they were like in Pilates, they were strengthening muscles that they didn't
Right.
know they had
That's
before
why
they started.
that's the connection.
Right. And the
It's
muscle
like,
is
and
awareness.
you think
Awareness
like
of
this
your
is
own
bullshit.
thoughts.
Like meditation and all this stuff and strengthening the mind, this is nonsense. And then you're a New York City ballet dancer who goes there and walks out on all fours. And the answer is maybe they got something to teach you.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
there's something for you to learn.
that's been my experience. There's even, no matter how notorious or, contradictory or, weird the tradition can get, the core teachings are actually kind of profound and really helpful. I mean, you hit a rocky spot in your life, you're really happy that you've got that practice under your belt. And there was one thing I was thinking about. Oh shoot, I missed it. It's right, awareness. There goes my awareness. The what you find is you become very aware that you are thinking, and you're aware of the different kinds of thoughts you're having. You're aware of the nature of the thoughts you're having. Like, something that may never occur to anybody is that all of your thoughts take place in the past and the future. None of your thoughts take place now. And when you experience the present moment, it's void of all thought, which is where the Mahayana idea comes from and where Nagarjuna's teachings come from, which is when you encounter naked reality, it has no essence. It's just pure being. And it doesn't really vary that much. I mean, there's no way to categorize it or describe it. You can't speak of it. Once you speak of it, it becomes
History.
thought. It becomes past. And so no one can describe an encounter with naked reality. And you get to do this during meditation after you kind of are able to let your thoughts kind of do their thing without dragging you along with them, which is what most people experience all the time. Maybe some people are naturally born, aware and awake, and they're not being dragged around by their thoughts. But one of the things that I thought was fascinating recently is this idea that some people have no inner monologue. Have you heard this? There was a study done, a neurological study,
Right. Yeah, I saw
and
something
their
about that.
conclusion was there are some people who have no inner monologue. And I found that laughable, honestly. I found that ridiculous, because they didn't stop to consider, well, maybe some people are not aware of their inner monologue. Maybe it seems that maybe they report that they have no inner monologue because they're so completely tied up in it that they're
Right. I
not,
mean,
they're like a fish in the ocean. They don't know what water
but
is.
what do you mean by what do you mean? I mean, I see I see vast swamps and quagmires of definitions that need to be crossed before you can start answering that question. Like, do you hear a little voice? And what does it say to you?
What does it say
And
to you? What does it sound like? Yeah, is it a
is it a high
I mean,
little
some people
voice or is
say
it a low
they
voice?
can't visualize in their heads, right? They have no ability to visualize things.
I
Um,
can't. I can't picture people's faces in my imagination. I
yeah,
mean, when I
that
see
I mean,
you, I know you're Jim, but I can't visualize somebody's face in my mind. Almost entirely, I can't.
it's unclear though. No, actually, there's a meditation practice where you do visualizations.
Yeah, but
Now,
I
would you just be completely unable, or would you, through the process of
who knows?
awareness and concentration, be able to develop that? I think the idea is that the assumption is most people have a narrator, in their head. Uh, while you're walking to the grocery store, it's like, I can't believe you said that to me.
Oh, sure,
And
yeah,
here's what I'm going to say when I see them again. Or I wish I had said this
right,
when
of
she
course,
said that.
yeah.
And all of that's the inner monologue, right?
Oh, okay, well,
And the
yeah.
idea that nobody has it is a
Well,
little weird. It sounds more like maybe people aren't aware of it.
maybe they don't
They're
have
so
it.
caught up
Maybe
in
it's not
it
a
that
big deal.
it's possible, but that the implications of people not having an inner monologue, meaning like they don't have thoughts, like
Oh, I
these
can
are.
look. Oh, Your Honor, hello. Yeah, I can confirm. Lots of people don't
well,
have
well,
thoughts.
this
Trust
leads
me.
this leads people like Elon Musk to think that there are non-player characters in the world and they don't
Yeah.
count.
Well,
Yeah, which I just
he
don't
seems
believe.
pretty NPC right this very moment
Yeah.
himself. So
Yeah.
maybe he should like back off on the
Oh
NPC
yeah, no,
accusations.
he's a genius.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's it strengthens that muscle awareness, and it also helps.
Right. Like we were talking, like you and I were talking about, at some point, you've got to just, one of the good things to do is to break the panic,
Hmm.
you know?
Yes, and you have to know that you're panicking,
Right.
and then you have to know that you can
It's going to
stop.
end.
Yeah,
It's not going to last forever.
right.
Like I had to do this, like when I was having all these surgeries on my eyes. And I'm
Mm,
like, this really sucks, but
right.
it's not going to last forever. And well, the more important thing is that you have over the course of your life, you have situations where you panic and you freak out.
Yep.
And then afterwards, you're like, okay, I really freaked out for no reason. And then you get into another situation and you freak out again.
Yeah.
The one I love is you go through something that's very painful.
Right.
And then afterwards you say, it wasn't that painful. I bet you the next time it happens, I'll be much better. And then it happens again. You're like, holy crap, this is really painful. But at the same time, you learn after a while. It happens a lot with like work. Like you have these
Right.
situations at work where like, oh, I'm so fired. This is going to be, this is a disaster. I'm a complete and utter failure. I had that lots of times, justifiably so. And then nothing happened. Or something happened, but it wasn't that big a deal. And then you learn to calm yourself down so that when the next situation comes along that's like that, you're like, okay, I might be in trouble, but chances are it's not going to be that bad. So just chill and wait to see. Don't spend a lot of time anticipating being beaten. Just wait until the beating arrives. And
Right.
so
Don't
that's why it's
pre-live it. Yeah.
right. And so that's why, you and I were talking about a good thing as you get older is, you can see it's a good thing or a bad thing, but the good thing is like, I've seen this movie before and I know
There's
how
yeah,
it ends.
there's a
I'm
certain
not
amount
going
of
to
awareness that
die.
is built up normally, even
Yeah.
without
I'm
practice.
not going
Yeah.
to die. They're not going to decapitate me. It may be bad, but chances are, 4 out of 5, nothing's going to happen here. So why get all wound up until they actually come after you with a pitchfork? Then that's the time to get really worried about things. But and so I think that's sort of a cognate idea. It's sort of a relative idea, which is being able to step outside yourself and say, "Yeah, I'm going to freak out. I can't really stop that. It's a lot of it's chemical. a lot of it is wired into my DNA. But at least I can objectify that freaking out. And I can say to myself, I can try to just take the edge off it and say, okay, part of you is just going to freak out.
Well, some of it is denial of what's happening. So you're having eye surgery, and you're like, I shouldn't be having eye surgery.
Yeah, you got to get over that real quickly.
That's not really, that's only going to lead to suffering. Well, it's the idea of also, again, I'm going to quote a teaching, and I don't know if it's genuine from the Buddha, but I want to say here, in the Mahayana tradition, unlike the tradition that existed before, let's say, the tradition that existed before said the Buddhas are very rare; they only occur every 50,000 years, and the teachings are lost eventually, and people don't have them, and they can't become enlightened.
And the Buddha can only come
until
back
the next one
until all the teachings have been forgotten.
Exactly right. That's not the view of the Mahayana tradition.
Okay.
The Mahayana tradition says there are many Buddhas. There's been the Buddha Gautama, and then there is Nagarjuna is considered a Buddha. Padmasambhava is considered a Buddha. There are many Buddhas, and they all have teachings, and they're all valuable. And that I prefer, because then it doesn't matter so much. Everything doesn't hinge on the veracity of the Gautama Buddha.
Yeah, you're not obsessing about one person, one historical person, getting all wound up about that.
It's just the teachings. If the teachings are good, they survive. If the teachings are not good, they don't. And that's actually remarkably true. Like, so guys who lived in Tibet, they're like sexist, and they have all kinds of prejudices and things like that. But those things fall away, and the teachings cut through. And I'm thinking of the second arrow, right? This is commonly taught. I don't know that this is something that actually was taught by the Buddha, but then at some point somebody said, this is a sutra, this is teaching, this is wisdom, and we're going to pass it on. And the idea is that the first arrow you can't avoid, and it does hurt, right? Nobody can deny, even for an enlightened being, that there is pain. The second arrow you inflict yourself. You take the arrow and jam it in yourself after the first arrow, and that arrow is the suffering. So that arrow is the worry. When is this pain going to go away? The denial, why did this happen to me? It shouldn't have happened. The blame, who the hell shot this arrow at me? How am I going to go forward and do all this stuff? When is the pain going to end? Etc. Through practice and meditation, you begin to just focus on what's the state of that pain. We're going to feel that pain, because that's real and that's happening right now.
Right.
All those other things are happening in the past and the future. And we have the strength of awareness to say, we're going to cease. We're going to cease doing that. So you cease jabbing yourself with a second arrow is the idea. Now, is that an original teaching? Don't know.
Who knows?
But it's good. It works. Right. It's like science. It works.
And my corollary is, when you get hit when somebody shoots a second arrow at you, it's better, because you're like, okay, I know how this is going to play out. It's going to hurt. Right. It's going to hurt forever.
The second genuine arrow, not the second arrow.
Not the self-imposed one, but the second physical arrow, and that's why I think meditation is important, and what you're talking about, because you build those muscles up, and you say to yourself, and I do this myself. I don't know if it's Buddhism or whatever, but I have that internal monologue, and it goes crazy all the time.
Right.
And I've gotten to the point where I'm like, please, dude, shut up.
Yeah.
This is going nowhere.
Yeah. It's so true. See, people come to meditation, they're like, the first thing almost all of them say is, I tried it and it didn't work for me. I sat there and my thoughts just kept racing. And then of course, most of the Buddhists that I know say, you did it right. That's how it is. But you have to keep doing it if you want those thoughts to start to subside. Yeah.
Right. And you got to.
They don't go away.
It's like,
they don't ever go
exercise. Away. It's like Pilates. You got to work at it.
Yeah, exactly. I tried Pilates and it hurt. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're doing it right. Exactly.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We good? We burned
that was
half hour?
Yeah. I'm really glad we tackled that one. It was a painful book to read for some reason for me. I might I might go further with, but I don't know. I'm not.
It's it's tough to see, like with Dominion, it's clear to see what the guy's going on about, which is that it's a classic history of it's a basic standard history of Christianity. And what
Right.
he's trying to tell you is how great Christianity is and how he starts off with a MacGuffin saying, I'm going to explain to you why it became such a widespread idea and how it became the greatest idea in history. But he doesn't really. At
Lopez
least
does. Lopez
what?
definitely does. I mean, he definitely says it's opportunistic, and they don't negate the existing gods. And the Buddhists didn't negate the existing god. They dovetail with every tradition. They dovetail with Taoism. They dovetail with Shintoism. They dovetail with uh, Bun in Tibet. They dovetail with Hinduism. It slips in easily, and then it offers you a way out. Because so that's the Four Noble Truths. There's life is suffering, which certainly in India at the time, you can imagine. And the truth. So there's the truth of suffering, the truth that we cause much of our own suffering needlessly, the truth that there's a way out of suffering, and then uh, there's a sorry that yeah that there's a that there is something called there is something that is the cessation of suffering, and that there's a way to that cessation of
Right.
suffering. And people are like, sign me up. How much you need? I'm
Right.
suffering.
Yeah. And I think Lopez really, I think he wants you to figure it out on your own. He's not presenting, I don't think he's presenting a very tightly wrapped package. I think
No.
he's challenging you. I think he is not, again, he's not putting a bow on it and presenting it to you. He's giving it to you in all of its messy variation
Yeah.
and handing it to you. Unlike Dominion, where
Yeah.
the guy writing Dominion is coming from a completely different thing, which is, wow, Christianity is great.
Right. And here's why.
And
Yeah.
and
Or here's what
here's all
happened,
its
and here's why.
here's all
Yeah.
its victories, and here's all the
Yeah.
great things about. I don't know. I've again, it's another one where I've read only 30%.
Mm.
Um, Maybe he lightens up a little bit, but he doesn't really. When somebody says, "I'm going to explain to you why," I want an explanation why, and I haven't seen that yet in Dominion. I mean, I can guess. I mean, there's some classic explanations of it, but I actually like the Hindu book better because I think the guy is just like, you figure it out for yourself. I'm going to put a lot of I'm not going to do a lot of assembly for you
Yeah. Oh,
here.
it's called Buddhism: A Journey Through History by Donald S. Lopez Jr. In case anybody's curious,
It'd be great
and
if we
he
could get
does.
Donald on the phone because he could probably tell you you're so full of crap. You have
Oh,
no
man,
idea.
right, right. Well, yeah, the Kalachakra Tantra don't agree with his interpretation that it's a call to war against the Muslims. I don't think that's true, but it's to fight the Maras. But whatever, the Maras are the distractions and the things that keep us from being enlightened. But the so that I was just flat out disagreeing with him. But he may know something about it that I don't know. I would describe it as somebody painting, a painting a group of people in a landscape by painting a leaf over here and then somebody's foot, and then
Mhm.
goes back and here's the bow tie this person's wearing.
Yep.
Oh, and that's an eyebrow over here. And the book evolves like that instead of like, here's Bob. I'm going to paint Bob first
Yeah.
because we're all curious about Bob, but he
Because he
doesn't
talks
do
about
that. He
food.
fills it in
Right. He has a
everywhere.
chapter
Yeah.
about food,
Yeah. And
about
eventually it all,
Buddhism, whether it's vegetarian or not.
yes, a
And
big,
he
big
starts from
controversy.
the beginning and he goes through hundreds of years talking about food. And then the next chapter is identity. And we
Hmm.
start all over again and we talk about, selflessness and the destruction of the self. And then he
Right. And
starts
how can you
all over again.
reincarnate if the self is destroyed
Right.
upon death,
And
etc.?
so
That's a huge controversy. And
it's
the
interesting.
dawn of the Mahayana is that's the, yeah. But the food thing too, like it was said that the Buddha did not, again, you don't travel during monsoon season and you don't ask peasants to give you only what you want to eat. You take whatever they give you because
Whatever they
otherwise
put in
it's
the
a
bowl.
hardship.
Right.
They want to give you because that improves their karma, and you will eat whatever they put in the bowl.
Right.
So these other bans against vegetarianism, it's like, well, think it through, right? Think it through. Traveling, wandering all the time, not a good idea. Think it through. We only eat okra. Not going to work, right? Or it's going to cause suffering on the part of the people who are making donations.
Right.
So I don't know. Does he present all sides of that?
He does.
Yeah.
He does. He talks about how, he says it's pretty clear from the earliest stories of the Buddha that eating meat was permitted.
Yeah. And in Tibet,
that's sort of it.
That's what you got is meat. You've got yaks.
Right. And
they're very conscious about, we're killing fewer animals because they're big.
And in fact, he talks specifically about yaks in Tibet, how the Buddhist monks in like 1970 or something like that try to convince the yak farmers not to sell their yaks to China to be slaughtered. Yeah. And the first year they agreed. The second year they said, not going to happen. Yeah. Can't do it. Sorry. It's just too much hardship for us not to sell these beasts off. And he presents that fact to you. He doesn't, unlike the guy in Dominion, he doesn't say, "Oh, and so this is proof that this is something." He just gives it to you.
No, it's true, and
it's for you to figure out.
What was upsetting for me, I realize now, is just that I realized that I've been steeped in a very one-sided positive view of the lineage that I studied, and that I really didn't consider all this other stuff that Lopez is talking about. And so it really highlighted my ignorance, and I suppose ultimately that's a good thing.
Well, on that happy note, let's land this plane.
You got it.
Okay.
Funny Not Funny is produced by Jim Infantino at Slab Media in Boston. Jim Infantino and Lionel Casson are the co-hosts. Our website is funnynotfunny.net. The theme music is from the song Wheel from the album Utopia Revisited by Jim. The opinions presented by the co-hosts are ridiculous and should not be taken seriously by anyone. Our intended audience is literally nobody. If you're listening to this podcast, you should probably pause to reflect on other choices you've recently made. Please do not subscribe or leave a rating or review. It only encourages us to make more. Thanks for listening.